now that we've looked at the entities that are declared in RDF, let's look at how those actually play out in Dublin Core. So first, let's look at a file that we've already seen, the Dublin Core DTD, DCMES XML DTD. So let me scroll down just a bit, and this should look familiar to you. This block, the entity DCMES, the Dublin Core metadata elements set, is being declared with all of these children. All of the 15 elements are being declared as DC colon and then the element name. So this is where that syntax, DC colon element name, is being established. And keep that in the back of your mind because we'll come back to that in a moment. So back at the top of this file, we have two namespaces being referred to here. The first one is the RDF namespace, which is our old friend 22 RDF syntax NS. The second namespace is the DCNS, Dublin Core namespace, and it is this persistent URL that, again, we've also already looked at. That persistent URL resolves to this file, the DCMI metadata terms, which, as we've seen, establishes the 15 elements in Dublin Core as well as the very lengthy list of terms that we looked at in the previous unit. So for the sake of example, let's look at the element date, just because it's fairly straightforward as an example. So what we have here is term name date. We have URI is this persistent URL, right? And again, we have something that's fairly self-referential, right? What this is saying is the term date is defined right here at this location in this document. If you clicked on this persistent URL, it would resolve to this location in this document. Right? Then we have the label date. We have type of term property. And now we know that property is defined in the RDF namespace. So whatever the properties or characteristics of properties, the date element here, and in fact all 15 elements, inherit those characteristics of property. Let's in fact look at property in the file 22 RDF syntax NS. Right? It is defined right here, as we've seen before. It's a subclass of resources. So property inherits all of the characteristics of resource, and then date inherits all of those characteristics. Let's look at the source code for this document right here, and what we have here is label date. So again, RDFS label, right? The label entity was declared in the RDFS document that we looked at previously. RDFS comment was defined in that document as well, and the label definition is what shows up here. Right? but in fact, that was declared in the RDFS document as comment. Right? So you see how what we have here is both the human readable version and the software parsable RDF XML tag. What we also have a little further down is type of term, right? Type of term we said was property. So this is an RDF type. It's defined in 22 RDF syntax NS. Property, right? That very location that we were just looking at. So what we have here, the human readable label type of term, is being given a definition in RDF. That definition is located in that document at that particular spot. So the point here is all of this pointing between documents to namespaces and RDF documents and whatnot, all of that tells your browser or any piece of software that's reading a document with these declarations in them how to interpret those entities, right? How to display them on the page, what other actions to take, whatever, when it encounters the date element or any of these other elements. Right? So now let's look at what that looks like in an actual metadata record. So this is an example of an external metadata record. This is the same example as the Mona Lisa example that I used in the previous unit. So the first thing that you do is you declare that this is an XML document, and then you have to declare a container element. Now, Dublin Core does not make any recommendations for what to call your container element. I've used metadata here. Other things you could use is Dublin Core or record. Right? Dublin Core does not care what your container is as long as everything inside that container makes sense and is correct syntactically. Now, at the top, you declare your namespaces. You declare your XML namespace, which here I've just made up an example address. And then the Dublin Core namespace is, again, the metadata terms that we looked at earlier. And finally, we get to the same metadata for the Mona Lisa that we have looked at previously, right? DC:title, open tag, / indicates the close tag, and then the content in between the open and the close, right? DC:subject open, DC:subject closed, and the value contained in between. And of course, each element value pair gets its own line. So this is a very simple example of what a metadata record using all of these entities that have been declared in RDF and in our various namespaces would look like. You have to declare the namespaces you're using. You have to use the correct syntax. But as long as you do that, any piece of software, such as a browser, will be able to interpret what these tags mean and make use of the values given within those tags.